Okay, welcome back. This is the latest game that I've discovered. Sooner or later I have to get a life and stop doing this, but this is a game between Moiseenko and Navara from the FIDE World Cup in 2011. So it's black on the move, and black quite rightly takes that last pawn, and we've got our favorite endgame on the board. If you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, I want to see how that rook and pawn versus queen endgame went, that's where we're going with this. But first, let's look at how queen versus rook went. Okay, so the defender is on the move, the defender is white, and the defender follows the rule when you can attack an opposing piece, you might as well do it. And we get that check, can't let go of the rook, so the king has to move away. It might have been better to play rook c3 check and go after the king first, I don't know, but at any rate, we have the wedge position. Now the whole point of my course, my database, is that it's there so that you will be able to recognize safe positions to move into. So in this case, you don't have to think. When you see a wedge, you know a wedge is an okay position to play into, and if your opponent creates a wedge, hopefully you remember how to handle it. So the attacker knows it's okay to play king d4 because that's just a wedge position and that's safe. And the defender, Moiseenko, in 2011 already knew turn a wedge into a lightning. He's probably just not yielding a lot of space. It's nothing like that. Although the database had been published by that point. I don't know if he saw it or not. Okay, so we get... There's a couple of ways to handle this position. Let me show you the orthodox way. This is not how Navara played it. But you give that check, and we're going to see some interesting stuff. Now, you'll probably recognize this as an Irva position type, except the attacker is the one on the move. Okay, it's important to understand that it's perfectly okay to turn it into this, which I call the fake Irva or the pseudo Irva. Whenever the attacker can finger the rook with the queen, it restricts the defending king's movement. The defending king can't just walk away from the rook and let it fall. At the same time, the defending king is restricting the rook's movement. So the rook can't move to the right. The rook can't move to the left because there's no available squares. It can't move up the board. That leaves down the board. So it has to go down there, and we're in a form of distant defense. So we follow our usual principle. We're going to attack from both sides of the king and gradually force a fork. Okay, the defender here follows the principle of staying as close to the center as possible without letting the pieces get dangerously separated. All right. We're now checking from the diagonal next to the diagonal of the rook. So that gives us access to a forking square, which is right here. So the defender goes there. And now, because we have controlled this checking square, we begin the process of cornering that defending king by walking in there. And what you see is we're creating a cage type position. There is no check from d1. And the king and queen are cooperating in controlling the c6 square. So we get one check there, we get a reverse cage, and that's the end of the checks. So the defender is kind of stuck for a move. Well, it would be possible to try rook h5 here, or the defender can just plain go here. Now again, from the library of positions concept, you should be able to look at queen a8, forming the Irva position, the original one that the world champion discovered, and know that that's a perfectly acceptable way of handling this position. So you can just play queen a8, and you'll march them all the way down to the bottom left-hand corner of the board, and that'll be it. Also, you can play this. Because I don't want to do that one yet. I meant to pick this one. There we go. If he goes there, this is a wishbone position, and you turn a wishbone into a thorn, but you do that on the edge of the board by pivoting it 90 degrees like that and like that. And now the defender doesn't have any very good choices. The normal way for the defender to handle this is to play the rook to a5, and then you get a check there, and the king has to go there, and we're in an absolute 7th position. Okay, so going back to our thorn position, what's an abnormal way of handling it? Well, in addition to rook a5, the defender also has this option. Now we're in a distant defense. Remember that the general idea of distant defenses is that the king is going to be forcing in from this direction, and we want to get the queen over here forcing in from this direction, and by creating that kind of pincher, we will eventually be able to force the win of the rook. So we go get the queen there, and let's say he goes there. Okay, get the queen there. We now have the queen on the diagonal next to the diagonal of the rook. That automatically makes this into a forking square. So he has to move back toward the king, toward the death trap. Doesn't matter which one he goes to. Let's just put him there. Okay, that's not hard to see. Stay on this diagonal. Force it. This is still a forking square, so he has to walk back up here. And now you got it. The triple threat is on the board. See that? It always happens on the central lines of the board, and we're already there. So it goes from here to here. This is where the defending pieces need to be for the triple threat to work. So you got the triple threat position on the board. The game is a loss. We've got a mate threat down here. The only way to break up that mate threat is to go there. And now we have mate threats here and here. You can't cover both of them. The only thing to do is an immediate sacrifice of the rook. Okay, so let's back it up a little further. Let's go all the way back here. So we're in the reverse cage, and we go there. And queen a8 is good, and queen d4 check is also good. But now he can also go here. Now I haven't talked a lot about diamond positions. This is a diamond position. Because they don't come up very often, and they're actually very complicated to understand, but for most purposes, all you need is a few basic rules. The most important rule is that whoever is on the move is at a disadvantage, and whoever's king is on the sharp corner is at a disadvantage. So the defender has his king on the sharp corner, so he's at somewhat of a disadvantage here. It's counterbalanced by black being on the move. But for the attacker, it's pretty easy to know what to do. Just maintain the opposition. Okay, you're the defender. What you going to do? Well, we can go there, in which case, check there. And now, if you go king b8, then all we have to do is keep the queen on the ideal diagonal, give the move to the other guy, and there's not much that he can do. I guess I should walk through this now. If he gives the check there, then we go there, and I think you can see the Philidor position beginning to evolve. If he gives this check on c7, that's just lethal because you end up with a fatal cage on the long diagonal here. So instead, he goes there, we go there, go there, Philidor's on the board. Okay. The other thing you can do at this point, naturally, is go there, in which case, put your queen in the center of the board, in the corner of the board, there. and form the thorn. Okay, we're going to get the same things we've already seen. Okay, so that was a long digression from our stem game, which we return to now. Moiseenko is the defender with white, and Navara is the attacker with black. And the defender correctly turns the wedge into a lightning. So the attacker plays this check. It's better to keep moving your pieces toward the center of the board in every way you can. So the attacker keeps the king close. There are no checks. So now the defender is going to try to set up a third rank defense. Okay, if you're the attacker, why not go for it? You know how to break a third rank defense. So we get this check, go there, taking away that square. Rook goes over there. And now this is the point where I suggest you may be better off playing Rook to h2 and going for a harassment defense. It seems like third rank defenses have gotten well enough known that a lot of people will know how to beat that in their sleep. And so the harassment defense offers the defender more chances to fool the attacker, but that's in other videos. Okay, so Moiseenko goes there. Okay, so in third rank defense lore, this is the position you're looking for as the attacker, and the move to play is right there, crossing this T. And this is the zugzwang position, which forces the defender into a concession. Instead, Navara plays there, attacking a hanging rook. Okay, I haven't seen that one before, but it's worth a shot. Okay, so we go over there. And now the quickest thing to do is play king e5 and go back to a third rank defense. But instead, we get that. Now, I'm not sure that I see the logic of the move. It's entirely possible that these two were playing on increment by now because we're on move 82. At any rate, your opponent will sometimes do things that you weren't expecting, and that's when general principles come in handy. So one of those is move toward the center whenever you can. So Moiseenko quite correctly does that. Okay, so Navara recognizes that he hasn't maybe handled this the best way, so he goes down here, gives that check, move toward the center when you can, give that check. Now it's necessary to do this block. And then we get a check there, falls back there, and check there, and we have an Erva position on the board. So again, looking for ways to convert to known positions at least keeps you from getting lost. The attacker hasn't made any progress from the point of queen to c1, but at least we're back in known territory now. Okay, so we play the Erva position. There we go. Got the check, bring the king over. One step done. Rook falls back, give the check, king comes over. And at this point, Moiseenko decides, why should I walk this all the way into the corner? Let's just go down here now. Once again, general principles come to your rescue. White's attempting a distant defense, so you try to give checks from one side with your king advancing from the other. And so what we get is a check there. King advances. Now that actually, it's not time for that yet. What you notice is that the queen is not controlling any useful checking squares. It's much better at this point to give this check and take control of this possible checking square so that the king can move forward. And if we get this, then you keep control of that square from here, and now it's going to be possible to advance the king to the 6th rank. Okay, so simply going here actually loses a lot of time, not surprisingly, to this. Okay, where are you going to go? Go over here, check here, and lo and behold, we have a javelin position. See, this is the reason that this game came to my attention. I decided to look through my database to find every time a javelin position has actually been played in competition. So here's David Navara against Alexander Moiseenko, and we have the javelin on the board. So that is the thing to do to prevent the microwave weight on C8. And we get this check. Now we've got our ideal way of breaking down a distant defense. The king is going to be advancing from the right. The queen is going to be checking from the left. And they'll gradually converge and force the win of the rook. So we go over there. Once again, it's not really time for that. It's better to give the check on A5 and then bring the king over. Okay, so we get that. We get a check there. We get a check there. Now at least we have a cage. Okay, we're back in known territory. So I'm not sure what would happen if Moiseenko had played rook e1 there, but no, it would have gone lost immediately. Never mind. That's the safe thing to do. And I'm really happy to see how well Moiseenko understood the uses of the stalemate defense, because that's an essential tool for the defender. That rook cannot be touched. Okay, so we get a check there. Go there. I had to pause briefly there to cough off camera. Again, this is not the best thing to do here. No, it's good enough. Okay, so we get a check there. He has to fall back somehow. Now, what do you do? So this is a case where Moiseenko is defending very well. Okay, so this is one of the three things you can do that's reasonable, and it's actually better to interpose the rook c8 here, but I would, without hesitation, play that myself because it's moving toward the center, and that's also not bad. So we get a check there, forces the king over, and walking in with the king, taking the opposition, that's the correct thing to do. So the king walks back into the corner. The queen is on her ideal diagonal. So the king comes in, we get a check there. Don't worry about this. This happens sometimes where the defender can check you back off the edge of the board, but now he has to decide what he's going to do. Well, what he does is return to his distant defense. So, unfortunately, David Navara knew what to do here, which is queen b3 check, king has to go over, or there's an immediate fork, and the triple threat position is on the board. This is the first case where I've seen it. So, Moiseenko gives that check, king walks over, and at this point, my database says the game is drawn. So I don't know if that was agreed drawn or what, but at this point, the defender is basically dead. So this is an example of a game from 2011 where the javelin position actually appeared in competition. It isn't the first game with that. We'll turn to that next. The first game that I've been able to find that has the javelin position in it is Fleer v. Monroy from 2008. So Fleer takes the last pawn, and we have queen versus rook, and the defender creates the wedge position. Okay, so Fleer goes here. That's a reasonable response, and then Fleer goes like that. Okay, the defender attempts to go into a distant defense, so we get this, followed by a check, and the javelin position is on the board. This is a much less interesting game than Moiseenko v. Navara, because instead of the correct rook to a5 stopping the microwave mate, he walks into it with this, so we can get a brief illustration of why this doesn't work for you. So what happens is there's several ways to win this. One of them is you give this check, and what he was banking on was being able to interpose the rook, but then all you have to do is take this line, and there's nothing left for him to do. Or, as Fleer played, you can take that, and either he plays king h3, in which case queen h5 is a microwave mate, or he interposes the rook and it's simply captured, or he moves into the corner, in which case you check on the h file and the rook interposes and the next move is mate.